This is a Guide Your Light network production, creating podcasts with purpose.
My name is Kiani Mills, and this podcast is created to help you see, feel, and experience the human side of business. I'm a business owner, an entrepreneur, and a parent. And like many who have traveled this path before me, I've been through the lows of the lows and the gut-wrenching pain. But I've been through the triumphs and the wins and the indescribable highs, all of which I consider to be my lessons in the school of life. On this show, we are going to start some conversations to ignite new world ideas into some very old age businesses. So if you're a leader, a business mind, or an entrepreneur, get ready to think, act, and feel differently so that we can all reach a new level of business success together. So, what are you waiting for? A big welcome back to this week's episode of She Can Humanise Business. I am joined today with a beautiful woman who I had the pleasure of sitting on her podcast not too long ago. So this is me graciously returning the favor, but so super excited to be able to flip the interview to the interviewee seat and learn a little bit more about her magical world and everything that she does and is experiencing at the moment, because there's some pretty big life changes going on. Welcome to the show, Ellis. It's beautiful to have you here.
Thank you, my love. How are you?
Oh, I'm incredible. How are you, more importantly?
I'm great. I actually feel awesome. 36 and a half weeks pregnant. So nearly at the end. I didn't expect to feel like this, where it's just like everything's just flowing. I'm a little bit more tired, but energy is still there.
Listeners, if you don't follow her Instagram, please do. She's got the most beautiful baby photos. I think that's one thing that I watch, the pictures that you put of your belly and things like that. Like, social media wasn't a thing when I had my kids. I can't wish for something that I didn't have, but it's such a beautiful memory and such a beautiful, I feel like I'm experiencing your pregnancy through you.
I love that.
Oh, it's great. But we're not here to talk about babies. Tell me and tell all of our listeners the amazing things that you do and the gift that you bring to the world.
I specialize with women's identity. So when they're navigating identity shifts, confidence, self-worth, and I work with a lot of new entrepreneurs that reach that first point where it's like, cool, I'm going to start a business. And then they go, oh, limiting beliefs. So they're the main areas that I work with. I also have my own podcast, so Nourished Minds, and that's my little safe haven to just have these in-depth, honest conversations. And what else? I'm a mama of two little cavoodles. So
hey, mama, I love it.
And yeah, I'm about to, transition into this next phase of life, which I'm super excited for, because this is literally what I coach women through. So I'm in super surrendering mode at the moment and just welcoming in anything that comes my way. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Oh, that's beautiful. And you've done it so elegantly. It's one of those things that you wish to see in a coach or a mentor. Lead by example. And as you do, as you said, you tell your women to surrender and flow through. You are doing exactly that. So you're embodying what you teach. I did a post recently and it was a bit of a, what do you want to hear about? And it was an overwhelming response that people want to hear more, understand more about imposter syndrome. And I'm sure that I have the right person on the other side of the screen to give us your, version of imposter syndrome that you see in your clients represented, and just a little bit of a synopsis around what it looks like in the everyday world.
So it's actually really interesting because imposter syndrome is so common. And I think it's something that shows up in each phase of your life. And I don't think it's something you can just unpack straight away and go, cool, let's tick that off the box. It's done and dusted with. For me, I've found within clients, it's a feeling that they get where it reoccurs. It actually reoccurs quite a bit. And with that, I think a lot of people assume that once they've knocked it on the head, it's just going to go. And even myself personally, like I've had that imposter syndrome feeling in my own business. And I think it's the essence of growth as well. I think it's a part of growth where it's like, oh, okay, I'm meeting an edge, am I feeling this? And equally, as we like shift, like I said, through different phases, I think there's different versions of it. I think there's a lot more deeper layers. And what I see is it's often the presenting problem, but there's actually a lot more under there. And it's when you work on those under layers and those problems that aren't, keen on the eye, that once you work through them, that's something that fizzles out. So as much as I think there's that main thing of like, I feel like I've got imposter syndrome, but I think it's the deeper layers beneath that. And like any presenting problem, it's like you can work on that, but what's underneath, like what's actually driving that?
Oh, I love that you said that, because I feel as though imposter syndrome at the moment feels like another one of those buzzwords. Everyone's kind of saying it and like, oh yeah, I feel like an imposter. I feel like this. Like, or are you just uncomfortable as a start point? Is a very kind of like basic, are you just uncomfortable because you're doing something new? Or is there something underneath? What are some examples of some of those deeper layers?
Self-worth. So really like doubting their own worthiness piece and going, okay, like, can I do this? And that's where then it comes off like I'm doubting my skills, I'm doubting what I'm actually good at. So it's a self-worth. And it's also sometimes what I've seen is actually that lack of identity. So when they're unstable in themselves, where it's like, okay, who am I? It then presents in how they're actually showing up.
Yeah.
Because if they're uncertain on the deeper level, then how are they ever going to be certain on the top level of, with their skills and what they're actually presenting with? So self-worth and identity is one of the two major pieces that I see come through, and then the confidence piece as well. So it's really interesting that you brought up imposter syndrome today, because it actually links to main of the three areas that I focus in, which I just think it's way more present in a lot of people than we realize. It presents in different ways for different people. I also agree with what you said in terms of, I think imposter syndrome has been a bit of a buzzword recently. I think you notice little buzzwords come out in the industry, and it's like people go, cool, I feel like I've got the symptoms. That's what I've got. Sometimes as well, it's a label that people want to almost tick off just a little thing of like, okay, maybe I know what that is.
And I can fix it.
Yeah.
I'm broken. I can fix it. Right.
So yeah, I have noticed that as well.
And it's really like, I know I lived most of my life in that whole like fake it till you make it kind of thing. And then I know for me, I kind of got to a certain level in life where I was like, oh, I don't want to fake it anymore. That's when my imposter syndrome kicked in, because I was like, oh, I can't hide behind that mask of fake it till you make it anymore. Holy shit, I actually have to be me now. That's when the worth kicked in. It was like, oh, am I good enough? Can I do this? What if I fail? What if they think I'm an idiot? All those kinds of things come rolling in.
Yeah. And I think as well, like everybody hears this saying of like, you're the average of the 5 people you hang around with. And a lot of people in personal growth, they start to shift through, okay, cool. Like who's in my circle that is, really helping me towards what I want, and vice versa, and who's holding me back. And then we start to invite in new people into our circle and meeting new people. And what I've noticed, if you're not grounded in who you are and you're not sure on who you are, that's where a lot of imposter syndrome comes in, because you're starting to interact with people that you're thinking they're more qualified than me. They've got more experience. And I think there's a fine line between really going, I'm really happy in who I am, and this is like an expansion for me, rather than that, going, oh, okay, I don't belong here. I don't fit in. I haven't got enough experience, X, Y, and Z.
So true. And it happens all the time. I feel like in the moment, we definitely feel like we're the only ones going through it. And it's such an individualized thing, but golly gosh, it's a pandemic.
Yeah, literally.
The pandemic of imposter syndrome.
And it's interesting that that's what your audience are like, wow, this is really present. Because
yeah,
like I said, there is more, I personally see there's more layers to it. But what if we were to stop focusing on it? What if we were to actually focus within rather than trying to find the labels of what it could be, because then I think that's when the energy in that direction starts to, you know, disappear slightly, because you're focusing on, okay, well, where am I at? What do I need to fulfill? And what do I need to change within myself? I think is a quicker way for you to be able to realize that potentially you haven't got as much imposter syndrome as you think.
I totally agree. And this phrase has come up so many times, and it's an oldie but a goodie, and it's where attention goes, energy flows. And if our attention is external and on the others around us, that we don't feel good enough, reroute that to go inside. Why am I feeling this? Where is this come from? You know, what in childhood did I not receive? Or where was I left to play on my own on the playground? Or, you know, finding that kind of real internal piece of, oh no, that's okay. That's something that's coming up from the past that isn't necessarily right now. And I'm projecting that out onto others. Complicated.
I know, humans.
Bloody hell.
Yeah. But equally as well, it's like, if you have a limiting belief, you are going to find every single way to validate that again and again and again, by focusing on it, by putting yourself in situations where you're like, see, I'm not good enough, because your energy is in that direction. So it is real. Like, you know, I look at parts of my life where I've potentially felt like, let's say, for example, like money, you know, I feel like money is a huge thing at the moment as well, that's coming out in a lot of areas in terms of what I see in others. And it's like, if you have the perception that there's a lack of money, then you're going to find every way to validate that, every way to justify it and prove yourself and be like, see. But if you were to look at the opposite and try and find the abundance within that, or whatever it might be, like money is an example, but you're going to find more of it. So if you want to find more abundance, you will find it. If you want to find more lack, you'll find it. And I've learned that very quickly, like over the years of, you know, growth, because I used to have quite a negative mindset. And well, if I think negatively, that's all I'm going to find. It's like, you'll find what you're looking for quite quickly.
I had this incredible human in my world today. We were talking about scenarios where one was a negative mindset, one was a positive mindset. And I was like, yeah, so it's kind of like cup half empty, negative, cup half full, positive. And he's like, or no cup and overflowing cup. And I was like, oh, I love that. It's like, because the negative person won't even have a cup to begin with. That is so true.
I love that.
I know, like, talk about polarities and just pendulum swinging, but it's true, you know, that can feel like the difference between negative and positive sometimes.
Yeah.
Incredible. So I have heard you mention the word identity a couple of times, and that sparks my interest.
Identity, I think, again, has probably changed over the years of personal development, of what people like conceptualize that with. And the biggest like identity piece that I work with is huge, like navigating life kind of shifts. So we can either have our own identity within, so knowing what we value, knowing what we love and what is worth in our life and what our passions are. And it's a case of inner knowing and identity. And then I see external identity. And that is where our external environment is defining who we are, or we're allowing that. And what I massively, massively see is, say, for example, like, let's go typical example, right? You've got your 9 to 5, you're married, you've got your house, you're known as, you know, someone who works here, you know, you live in this estate, you are known as, you know, Bob's wife or whatever, and, you know, oh, you're Kai's mom, whatever it might be. A lot of your identity is external. So it's like, you've got all these little labels that you've then gone, cool, this is who I am. Yeah. And what I see is huge shifts will happen. So it might be someone goes through a big separation, or someone loses a big corporate job, and they're all of a sudden left with, oh, actually, I feel a piece of me missing. Who am I? Like, actually, who am I? And another example of who I work with the identity piece is mums. So, and it's interesting because I'm about to go through this, you know, maiden to mother. And there's a difference when you have your identity within compared to having it, like I said, kind of defined with your external environment. So I work with a lot of mums that are shifting through that, where all of a sudden they've been this individual that does all of these things, and now they've gone into motherhood, and it's an identity that they've never experienced for first-time mums. They didn't know how it was going to feel. They didn't know what it was going to bring or who it was going to make them or what their focuses were. And that's where they have to refine themselves, because it often happens when they weren't in tune with the internal before. So without their job or without being full-time in their job and it being their main focus, it's like, oh, okay, like, what do I want to do? Who am I? What do I enjoy doing? Like, who am I other than a mum and a wife? And for some people, that actually is the identity shift that they've always been waiting for, because they've been ready for it. And for others, it's so different to the life they were living. It just makes things feel a little bit out of alignment. And it's really about coming inwards and finding, okay, who am I? Who can I be when I'm on my own? Who can I wake up as? Who can I be for myself rather than for everybody else, or to fit the social norm? And that's another thing that I think is a huge thing, is people want to fit these boxes in society, and potentially they might learn something, have an increased awareness, a certain box in their life is challenged, and it's like, oh, okay, maybe I don't believe in that, or maybe that isn't me anymore. And that's when it's just that it's the feeling of missing pieces. So for me, I think, again, identity is slightly different for everybody. But again, it's the shift of external and internal.
That's incredible. And gosh, I wish they taught this stuff at school. Imagine learning this. I mean, I don't know how much you'd take in at kind of 16, 17 years old, but from that minute, we are taught that we must go to university or have a job to define who we are, or have a degree to be successful, or whatever that kind of stigma might be. But gosh, imagine if we could teach our young people to not carry these identities and remain who they are, so that when they do get to a point of becoming a parent, or, you know, getting that promotion, or, you know, buying that thing, that they don't then go, oh, that's who I am. That's how I identify.
Yeah. And it's the labels as well. Labels is huge, you know, whether it's, you know, parents placing labels on you as you grow up. So it's like, oh, I'm a dancer, whatever it is, whatever hobby you've taken on. It's like, oh, you know, my daughter's a great dancer. And unconsciously, these little labels on programs are always being suggested. And another one is when we get into that point of getting a career, it's another little label, but also things like human design. What's your star sign? Like, these are all labels that what people are doing is, if they feel a lack of identity, or that, oh, they're asking that question, who am I? They start to, if they've either not been in the personal development world before, or they're kind of within it and they've realized these little ways that you can get to know yourself more, they seek these and they go, cool, well, I'll look into human design. That will give me a bit more of an idea of who I am. Cool. I'm going to look into my star sign, because that will give me a little bit more of who I am. And I've been there. I've done that. And they're incredible modalities, and they are really insightful. But anybody, like anyone that comes across my path, I always say, you can learn things, but you can also choose to reject it as well. And you also don't have to take it on literally. Like, take things with a pinch of salt. Don't allow something to define you, because what I see happen is they go, I can't do that. Like, I can't just focus on one thing because I'm a manifesting generator. And it's like, there's the pros and cons. So if you're lacking that feeling of who am I urge you to go internal first before doing these little things, because some people feel more complete from getting these more like extra labels, but it's still missing that key element, which is like what's on the inside.
Oh, I love that so much. And you're right. It's a double-edged sword. We can have all of, and look, again, we have social media. We have everything we need at our fingertips. So you can find out so much about yourself going externally and going online based on your star sign, your birth date, where you were born, how you were born, all those kinds of things. Or you can kind of sit down and have a really honest conversation with yourself.
Yeah.
Who am I? And I know for me that path to coming back into touch with who I am, I started back to what lit me up as a kid. What did I love doing? What was it that made me feel free and started doing those things again? So when I took up dance practice for Dancing CEOs earlier in the year, it sparked this remembrance in me of like, oh, wow, I love this. I love being able to move my body and learn and challenge myself. And I remembered how much I loved it as a kid. And there was this childlike part of me that was like, I'm alive again. This is incredible. But I wouldn't have got that from going and reading about dancing. I had to physically go and do it.
Yeah. And it is about the doing. And I think people say, I can't just sit there and ask myself, who am I? And I'm like, that's the question you've been asking yourself, but you've been filling that void with other things. But who are you in solitude? Who are you when you're just in nature with no technology? Who are you when you're doing the things you love? And what are the things that you love with no external distractions? And this actually, like you said, with the childhood, what do you enjoy? Like, it's actually a huge indicator. And we often drop out of tune of those because we're adults, but actually they're like the buzz of and the core. And if you can bring them in and you can start to see that spark and the things you enjoy again, it's like a cascade. I feel like, you know, you start to have the doors opening like, oh my God, yeah, I forgot I enjoyed that. Oh, okay. So rather than, you know, scrolling, for example, like I can actually start doing the things I love now because I know I know what does bring me joy. You know, I know what puts a smile on my face. I know what fills me up. And it is sometimes just the little tweaks and just actioning and exploring that will start to open up and like those lines, you know, that we've potentially cut off in the past.
It's so true. It's so true. And that kind of, as you're explaining it, I go, well, who are you without the labels that, just as you said right at the very start, that society can put on you and stages of life can put on you? And there's this really cool exercise that I've done before at a networking kind of business, more focused seminar, where you had to explain what you did without saying what you did.
I love that.
It's so cool because it didn't actually become about what you do as a task. It's how you make people feel, the problem that you solve, and how you leave them better than they were before. I was like, that's so cool. In business, imagine if we did that in life. Imagine writing your own business card and being like, I'm a magnificent manifesting genius. I'm a mum with 2 kids.
Yeah. And again, it's just that programming, like, who are you? Like, I think at the start when you said, so explain a little bit about you, it's very much, okay, business, this is me, and this is part of who I am. And yet, if you were to dig deeper in all of those elements, I could have explained that to you without even suggesting any of them. And it's like, how much more spicy would life get if we could really like answer in that way? It's a different thought process as well of, you're not this, and this. It's like, let's go a little bit like, who's underneath that?
And vulnerability too.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I'm going to tell you who I am beneath smoke and mirrors.
Yeah. Yeah. And as well, like, oh my God, there's so many angles to identity, but physical appearance. Like, a lot of people's identity is their physical appearance. It's also your self-expression. So there's, you know, identity in order that's sometimes covering up, you know, worthiness. And then there's like what you're wearing and your identity in terms of actually expressing yourself, what people wear and, you know, who they are, and the colors of the hair and the things that they put on their feet. Like, and that, when I can see someone truly expressing themselves through what they wear and physical appearance, I'm like, I love that. And you can see where there is the aspects where it's like people are covering up like that feeling or that limit within them. So yeah, identity, as much as it's internal, it's exposed as physical appearance through a lot of ways as well.
Yeah, wow, incredible. Now, you said you worked in 3 main areas. I'm guessing imposter syndrome was one, identity is one. Do we have another?
Confidence. So it probably ties in with a lot of, they're the main like keywords that prominently come up. Equally, they all intertwine. Yeah.
Confidence is such a big one, because we can see, and I'm watching my kids at school have children who are overly expressive, and then there's the children who are underly expressive, and in both of those pendulum swings, lack of confidence they can both be as equally lacking in confidence, but portray that so differently. Whereas to the outside, so to my kids, they're like, oh, mum, he doesn't care what people say about him. He's got no fear. He's got so much confidence. He's too confident. I was like, well, underneath that, there may very well be a really hurt little boy. So we need to treat him just like you'd treat the other little boy that's sitting shyly in the corner. Do you see that too in adults presenting as well?
Yeah, massively. It's like the introvert extrovert, right? Like we assume that if you're extrovert, they're confident, and if you're introvert, they're not confident. You can get someone who is extrovert that is actually just presenting, and they're just putting on a show, essentially, to hide the feelings and numb the feelings that are beneath. And then equally, someone could be sat who is an introvert, so confident within themselves, and a lot of it's energy. Like, so for example, I used to be told, Ellis, you're such an extrovert from family, like you're such an extrovert, you're so confident, you're so this, you're so that. And yet underneath I was riddled with like feeling of not good enough, and I didn't feel confident in speaking, yet I could create this persona because I'd always been told I was confident. And it wasn't until I moved to Australia where I didn't have familiar faces to be that confident kind of surface level person. And that was a real challenge, because I'm like, where has my confidence gone? And then realized I never actually had it in the first place. Wow. It was someone telling me I was confident, someone telling me I was extrovert and loud, and, and so when I then, again, an identity kind of question of like, when I was here in Australia, meeting new people, I was so insecure. I didn't want to talk to people. It was like, oh, this is unfamiliar. I'm meeting new people, and I'm not feeling the pull to being that how I was, because that was not me. So it was such a switch in like, actually, I love my own space. And now I can quite confidently be more introvert, which I never realized I kind of wanted more of, because I found that within myself rather than someone telling me what I was. So I think a lot of the time we can present confidence in a way to kind of avoid, and then we can present confidence in a way where it's like, no, I'm grounded in who I am. It's a feeling of certainty in self, and you're not fearing that insecurity of like worthiness as well. So again, it all intertwines so much. For me, I can feel it mostly through energy. So if I'm in a room of people, it's the energy piece of when I know someone is like, I'm like, yeah, they're confident in self. I love that. I think it's the certainty piece.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you were when moving to Australia would have been a thing in of its own, and then realizing, holy crap, I thought I came here being this big confident person and I'm actually not. What was it that brought this to your attention, other than obviously not wanting to interact with other people, but then also too, what was it that helped you see with clarity and with certainty, well, no, hold on, this is who I am?
It actually started with being by myself. I realized that I had never given myself an opportunity to actually just be with me. I noticed that in England, I was always running around. I'd never actually spent time with like Ellis. So I actually had no idea who I was. And removing common friends, again, a job, being known as like Phil and Rachel's daughter, and, oh, Ellis, the person who runs this bar. Yeah. Like, again, all my identity labels gone. And then I come to Australia, and that first signal was, okay, well, I don't actually have this same level of confidence or like extrovert feeling that I want to give towards people. But then being on my own, I was like, oh my God, like I had physical like anxiety in me. And it was like this overriding feeling of like, I need to fill this void really quick. I need to organize something. I need to try and make plans, because me being by myself right now is not okay, because it would bring up negative thoughts. So interestingly enough, when we look at like childhood traumas and things like that, it can be one sentence that was said. And what I had realized years later through doing a lot of work was the reason that I couldn't sit with myself and be with myself was because, like, when I was like 5, I had a family member say, it's all good, you just go and do this. I'm just going to sit here on my own and just be unhappy. And that one sentence literally made me think that being alone was a negative thing and a sad thing. So I'd never created that space for myself. So that feeling of, wow, okay, this is present in my life, was knowing that, okay, well, I've never actually connected with myself internally. I don't know what I enjoy really, apart from it was party in England. Again, utilizing alcohol for confidence. It all puzzle pieces come together when you really start to look at yourself. And the more I spent with myself, the more I started to realize that I've never really been in touch with who I really was. And it took me to remove every single label in my life and move to the other side of the world to really get to know me. When people say lean into the things that are uncomfortable, like, it changed my life. And I do not know where I'd be today if I had stayed.
Yeah. And the beautiful thing around it is that you did persevere, and you said that there were negative thoughts that were coming. And sometimes for a lot of us, the minute we start to get those negative thoughts, we're like, oh no, we know where that goes. We've watched others do it. We've watched people on TV do it. We know where that leads. We're not going down there.
Yeah.
And that in itself can be enough to turn people off.
Yeah.
So what was it for you that kept you pushing through and going like, nah, I got this?
I once heard someone say, lean in on the moments when you want to lean out. Every time that I wanted to get a flight home, because I was like, it's easier just buy a new car, get the same job again, start earning money, sweet. I'm back in the environment I know. So I was constantly being pulled back to that old version, because that was what I perceived as like being my happiest. The thing that kept making me remain in what I was leaning into was just knowing, like, if I lean out right now, I'm actually giving up on a lot, because I'm actually exploring so much. So it's just, okay, if I feel like I'm leaning out, no, it's now when I actually need to lean in. Any edge that I met, it was like, just slightly lean in more, just lean in more. Like, what is this inviting you, like, into seeing or hearing, or, increasing awareness around?
Beautiful. So it sounds as though you were prepared for what was on the other side, as opposed to so fearful of it that the shutdown took over.
Yeah. Knowing that I'd made such a big move, I also think there was part of my ego that was like, go home, because
we're not quitting now, girlfriend.
Yeah, because I'd also had friends when I left say, you'll be home in 3 months. You'll be home in 3 months. And I remember just thinking, no, actually, like, the fact that you have doubt before I've even left, and you're already telling me, oh, you'll be home in 3 months, you won't last. So I think those little words that I kept hearing was like, that's not happening, because I'm actually okay. I'm okay. Like, as much as I'm still having an incredible time traveling, I'm really facing some things I've never experienced. But there was that ego part that I think was a driver of like, I'm not ready to see those people yet.
And this is the beauty in the ego. Yes, there is a lot of negative connotations about it, but God, it can bring some real confidence and stubbornness in like, oh no, I want to see this through.
Yeah. And we require ego. Like, it's negative when someone feels like it's overpowering someone else. And like, ego is what drives many areas of your life.
Yeah.
But people just don't realize it's ego because they've held a negative connotation to it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I say to my kids all the time, I'm like, ego is the thing that pops up that makes you look both ways before you cross a road. We thank it. But the ego is also the one that tells you to jump off a bridge because your friend did. Don't listen to that one.
Yeah.
Is it there to help or is it there to hinder?
Yeah.
I
love that.
You've got so much to play with when we have these conversations with our children. And one of the things that came to me before while you were talking about mums who are transitioning into motherhood, I know for me, having had my kids at 21 and 23, for me, my identity, I'm going to call it my midlife crisis, came when my kids got to an age where I didn't necessarily have to be the mum, and I'm still a mother, and that is a very clear role that I play in my life. But it was almost coming out the other side. It's like, okay, well, if I am a mum, what else am I? What am I beneath being a mum? Who was I before becoming a mum? You know, mummy guilt's like, I've never felt anything like mummy guilt in my life. So then it's like balancing between work and motherhood and friendships and relationships and all the juggling. But yeah, that for me was a really, really big one.
I feel like there's a part where the mums feel like, oh, okay, there is more than just being a mum. And I say just being a mum, like
the biggest job in the world.
100%. And some people like, and this is like, I may want this. It's like they want it to be their all. They've been wanting this part of their life for their whole life, and they just want to be a mum. So I always say, like, it's when you say you just want to be a mum, it's like, no, you want to be a mum. And what I see is people have either fully, like mums have fully gone into the mother role, loved every essence of it. And then all they've done is the more time they've had is they've gone, oh, so I could create more. Like, what's this next version of me look like? And it's the questioning they ask themselves where they start to realize, like, okay, cool. So I am more than this because I'm ready to be more than this now. And I know there's possibility out there. Yeah. And I think it's the way society's going as well, with a lot more people stepping into entrepreneurship, realizing that there's other ways of creating either income or flexibility in their life. They're realizing there's more out there as well than potentially what they had prior to being a mum.
Yeah, so good. There's this real sense that I have at the moment. I keep saying a lot, like, you can be both. And for me, what I've learned in my experiences is that the only thing that was missing for me was me giving me permission. Because I had this idea in my head that I had to be this, or I had to be that, or I had to do this. And then there became this moment in time where I was like, oh, no, a second. What am I waiting for? Am I waiting for someone else to give me permission to go and do the thing, or to go and be the thing, or to go and feel the thing? It comes back to here. And who am I identifying with? And stuff what anybody else is.
Yeah. And we actually get to be it all. Like, we don't have to limit ourselves. And I think that is what people are starting to see is, so there's people doing it all. It is possible. And if they can do it, I can do it. And I love that energy. Like, I love it so much, because if we can have women come back to the core of who they are and know their worth and be confident in decisions, in what their beliefs are, what they value and what they enjoy, and just the words they speak, and knowing that they're showing up with their truth, it invites in so much more in your life, because you've got that belief, you've got, I know who I am. And identity shifting, we're evolving minutely. So the identity piece will never fully disappear, because it's changing every day. Like, our values are always evolving, and beliefs are evolving. So it's like, it's a moving piece of our life all the time. But if you're connected within and you're giving yourself the time and the solitude and to ask yourself the questions, then you're going to be kept up to date. And then you're not going to hit that point of like, whoa, I'm so out of tune with who I am. Yeah, if we can give that gift back to women, like, they start to see what they can create, and they start to realize, like, wow, I am worthy of that. I have the confidence to do that.
And there's this feeling that I have around the fact that, healthier women, in terms of like internally healthy, create healthier men. And therefore healthier men create healthier women. And while, yes, we're doing it for ourselves and in our womanhood and in our power, inadvertently we are doing it for everyone else, and healthier relationships and healthier examples for our children and healthier everything. Like, it all starts with us. And I know that sometimes it feels like, oh, it's just me. What does it matter? I'm just one person. The ripple effect is ginormous. And, then as a woman, we are able to birth a conscious female and a conscious male, and create, the future generations of consciousness, wholeness, empowerment. It's a beautiful thought of what the world could look like in the years to come.
Yeah, 100%. It's like bringing the unconscious to conscious. Like, the awareness piece is there. And when people can access that, like you said, it opens up so much for everybody around you as well.
Oh, golly gosh, I've got like all the feels. This is incredible. Oh my goodness. And I'm so mindful of time, but I really would love, please share with everybody where they can find you, how they could work with you, anywhere we can kind of find all the deliciousness.
So I'm on Instagram mainly. That's where my face will always be, at Ellis Rose Coaching. And it's funny actually, because in England, Ellis is Ellis. And then when I moved to Australia, I've been called Alice, Ellie, Elise. So I don't know if it's my accent or the way that the tongue rolls with Australian accents. I have no idea, but it's ELLIS. So Ellis Rose Coaching. And I also have my own podcast as well. So Nourished Minds on Apple and Spotify. And yeah, I do one-on-one coaching and group coaching.
Incredible. Thank you so much for coming. I've loved everything that we've spoken about. Thank you for being so vulnerable as well and sharing your story with us. I really, truly appreciate that. And, I've been on the receiving end of it. So yeah, thank you again for your time and presence. And thank you to all of you for tuning in once again to listen to these incredible guests and listen to my little take on their things as well. So I really appreciate it. She Can Humanise Business. You can find us on all the social platforms. You can follow the podcast on all of the podcast platforms as well. All of the links will be in my bio. Thank you so much for tuning in. And I look forward to you guys hearing my voice again next week with my next incredible guest. Thanks, guys. Have an incredible day.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I would love to hear your feedback around what resonated and what key lessons and learnings that you took out of today's episode. You can find me on Instagram and on LinkedIn under the She Can Humanise Business podcast or Kiani Mills. I really hope that you were able to see, feel and experience a new way of humanising business.